The last part of the notes is going to be referring to the 3 special segments that can be drawn into triangles that create proportional parts. And I've got these 3 listed here. You're going to want to draw them into your notes so you have them to refer back to. We're going to be just setting proportions up every time, and what you should notice is that each rule is basically going to be set up the same way. So the only difference is you just have to be able to identify what special segment you're working with, because if you can do that, then you can set up a proportion the same each time. The first one we're going to focus on is an altitude. You've seen altitudes before, we just haven't talked about them in a while. Remember, an altitude is another name for height, and they create right angles, so that's important. And so I've drawn those 2 for you already. We've got triangle ABC and triangle GJK. These are all going to be considered similar triangles. That's important to remember. And the altitudes are also drawn in here. BD is an altitude and JH is an altitude. They create those right angles. And all we're going to do is set up a proportion. So these rules say that the special segments are going to be proportionate to a set of sides ratio. So I'm going to write this out with my letters. So the altitudes BD over JH. So this ratio has to be proportionate to a ratio of a side. In this case, we'll do BC over JK. Keep in mind that I'm keeping the order the same. BD was the altitude of the largest triangle, so I started the side BC with the second ratio. Make sure you keep them in the same order or your proportion won't work. And then on the bottom, JH was the smaller one, and then JK also went with the smaller triangle. Then you could just set up an equation and solve. That might look something like this. Maybe I tell you that the altitude here, we don't know the height, and then this side here we've put 27. And then on the other side, we could put the altitude as 8, and the side here is 12. I just fill into my proportion, and I solve. And that would look like x over 27, x over 8. Oops. There's more than one way to write this. So x over 8 equals 27 over 12. Now, you could set this up a little bit differently and get the same answer, and that's going to be the same concept. This is just one of the options. If I cross multiply, we get 12x equals 216, and then divide by 12, you get that x is equal to 18. So that would be the height of this particular altitude. All right, so there's the altitude. The next one we're going to talk about is the angle bisector. Remember, angle bisectors are segments that split an angle into 2 congruent angles. All right, and I've drawn these in for you. I'm going to go ahead and label these a little bit. So this angle here is going to be congruent to this one, and then this angle here would be congruent to this one because those are angle bisectors, and my proportion is going to look very similar. I'm going to use the angle bisector on the top, so ZY over TM. So angle bisectors first, and then is going to be congruent to the ratio of some sides. So XZ of the first triangle, and then RT of the second triangle. And then just like the altitudes, if I gave you some numbers and variables, you'd plug it into your proportion and you'd solve. All right, so there's not much variation in these. You just have to know that it works for altitudes and angle bisectors. And then the last one is the median. Now, medians are a little different. We really haven't talked about those much. A median is a segment that is created from an angle to a midpoint. All right, and remember, midpoints split segments in half. So when I'm dealing with a median, instead of angles being split in half, my side is going to get split in half. So it's going to be HF and FS will be congruent, and then TN and NE would be congruent. And then again, just like before, set up your proportions. So have the medians in one ratio, VF over RN, is going to be proportionate to one pair of sides. Maybe I do VS over RE. And then we'd be done. All right, so you could solve, you could plug a bunch of stuff in. It just depends on what you're given. On a median, it might look something like this. Maybe the median they give you is that X is here, and these two sides are 6, and then maybe this segment here, obviously not drawn to scale, this is 21, and maybe these are both 14. So they may not mark them congruent, they may just give you the measurements. And then all you'd have to do is plug in your altitudes and then plug in a side. In this case, if you're going to use a side, you could use HS and TE, so get the whole length, and then that would work. So you'd use 12 and 28 to plug into your ratio. Multiple ways to do it, it'll get you the same answer. So if you have any questions about how to set up those proportions with medians, angle bisectors, and altitudes, let me know. But that's it for this section today. Thanks for listening.